While everyone was glued to their TVs watching America shoot for the moon, something else was going on. A much more brutal space race, really, happening kind of in the shadows. This is the story, the forgotten one, about the Soviet Union's absolutely relentless and often tragic quest to conquer Venus.
I mean, we all know this story, right? The Cold War is in full swing, JFK makes that famous speech, and boom, the entire United States military-industrial complex is aimed at one single shining target up there in the night sky.
Okay, but what about the other side? The Soviets. If America was all in on the moon, where were they aiming their rockets? Well, it seems like they decided that if America wanted to land on the moon, they'd try to land in hell.
Yep, you heard that right. Venus, our so-called sister planet. And their attempt to get there would become one of the most punishing, heartbreaking, and, ultimately one of the most incredible stories in all of space exploration.
So, the big question is, why Venus? I mean, why pour all that money, all those years, into this one specific planet? Well, you gotta remember, back in the 60s, Venus was a total mystery box.
Think about it. We knew what Earth looked like. But Venus? It was completely shrouded in these thick, impenetrable clouds. Scientists at the time, they had some wild ideas. They genuinely thought it could be a twin to Earth, maybe hiding these incredible, lush jungles, or even oceans, maybe even life. You could look at the moon through any old telescope, but seeing the surface of Venus, now that would be a real first. And so the Soviets, they went all in. I mean, this wasn't just a one-and-done kind of thing. They planned a staggering 18 missions. The whole program was called Venera, which pretty simply is just Russian for Venus. And the whole goal was to be the first to crack open that mystery box and finally see what was inside.
But, as they found out pretty darn quick, Venus wasn't about to give up its secrets easily. In fact, it felt like the planet itself was fighting back, with everything it had.
Man, those early years were just brutal. I mean, one mission after another just failed. Venera 1, the very first probe we ever sent to another planet, went dead silent after just a week. Venera 2, gone right after leaving orbit. Venera 3, well, it technically made it to Venus, but only by smashing into it after all its systems failed. Just a silent, dead piece of metal. But Venera 4, that was different. Its failure was the real turning point because it taught them the first, truly terrifying thing about Venus.
So, as it was descending through the clouds, the probe just stopped. Radio silence. It took a while to figure out why, and the reason was just horrifying. The atmospheric pressure was so intense, way beyond anything the engineers had planned for, that it literally crushed the spacecraft in midair. Just crumpled it like a soda can. The message couldn't have been clearer. Venus wasn't our sister. It was a pressure cooker from hell.
Okay, so you're faced with a planet that can crush your multi-million-dollar spacecraft like it's a piece of paper. What do? Well, the Soviet engineers went right back to the drawing board. Their thinking was, if a normal probe can't survive, screw it. We're not going to build a normal probe. We're going to build a tank.
The whole strategy just flipped on its head. Forget all this lightweight stuff packed with delicate science instruments. The new design for Venera 7 was an absolute beast. I mean, it was ridiculously over-engineered. They actually sacrificed science gear just for more armor, for pure brute force survival. The only goal for this mission was to survive the landing. That's it.
And guess what? It worked. After a whole decade of nothing but failure, on December 15, 1970, Venera 7 slammed down onto the surface of Venus. Its parachute actually ripped on the way down, and it kind of toppled over onto its side, but it survived. For 23 precious minutes, it sent this faint but steady signal all the way back to Earth. And just like that, it became the first thing we ever built to successfully land on another planet and send something back.
And the data it sent back, whoa, it was terrifying. The surface temperature was 465 degrees Celsius. Let me put that in perspective for you. That's hot enough to melt lead. It's more than twice as hot as a pizza oven. The pressure, 90 times what we feel here on Earth. That's like being a full kilometer deep in the ocean. And the winds were screaming at 360 kilometers per hour. So yeah, this was no jungle paradise. This was a full-blown inferno.
All right, so they did it. They survived the landing. They got the first readings from this hellscape. So what's next? Well, now came the really big one, to actually see the place. I mean, this was the holy grail of the program. After all that work, all the failures,
all the sacrifice, the ultimate prize was a picture, just one photograph from the surface. So the next missions, Venera 9, 10, 11, and 12, that was their one big job, get that picture.
And this is where the story just gets so frustrating. You see, each of these landers had 2 cameras, right? So they could get a nice panoramic view. But just look at what happened. On Venera 9 and 10, only 1 camera on each lander worked. Okay, half is better than none. But then on Venera 11 and 12, which survived for almost 2 hours down there, neither camera worked. 0 photos. They sent back tons of other great data, but not a single solitary picture.
So you have to ask, what was going on? Was it some super complex electronics problem? Did the heat just fry everything? A software bug? I mean, what on earth could cause 4 missions in a row, we're talking billions of dollars of hardware, to fail in the exact same way?
The answer. Oh man, the answer is just infuriating. It was the lens caps. A single stuck lens cap. These little metal caps were supposed to protect the cameras on the way down and then just pop off, but they didn't. On 4 straight missions, this tiny, spring-loaded piece of metal just got stuck, blinding the cameras and robbing us of these priceless, first-ever views of another world.
But thankfully, that one working camera on Venera 9 did its job. And for the very first time, humanity got to see the surface of another planet. And it wasn't a jungle, it wasn't an ocean, it was this terrifying alien landscape of sharp, broken rocks, all under this gloomy, oppressive-looking sky. I mean, what a historic moment.
And this really kicked off the golden age of the program. For the next 2 missions, Venera 13 and 14, they finally fixed that darned lens cap problem. And the results? They were spectacular. We got the first color photos of Venus showing this weird brownish-orange sky. They even had microphones that recorded the first sounds from another planet. The wind, maybe some distant thunder. And they had these arms to test the soil, which of course led to one last kinda hilarious failure. On Venera 14, the testing arm popped out and landed right on top of, you guessed it, the ejected lens cap. So it just sat there, diligently measuring the hardness of its own garbage. So yeah, despite all the setbacks, the crazy failures, the bizarre mishaps, the sheer amount of work and ultimately success from the Venera program just left this huge, undeniable mark on how we see our solar system.
In fact, they sent so many probes there and had so much success that for a long time, people in the space community just kind of called Venus the Soviet planet. And that legacy is still there. Even today, a ton of the craters and valleys on Venus have Russian names, a permanent shout-out to the incredible work they did.
When you get right down to it, almost everything we first learned about Venus, we learned from Venera. They're the ones who taught us it was this rocky, volcanic wasteland. They figured out the sky was this weird orange color, that the clouds were made of sulfuric acid, and that the atmosphere would crush you with carbon dioxide. Later missions even used radar to map the whole planet through those clouds. The Venera program completely changed our view of Venus, from a possible paradise into the absolute hellscape we know it is today.
And that brings us to the final, really big question, doesn't it? After all of that, all the effort, all the money, paying such a high price to finally succeed and become the undisputed champions of Venus exploration. Why did they stop? Why haven't they gone back? In all the decades since the last Venera mission, Russia has never returned to its planet.